on with the show. First off, we have Dave Lynch, an engineering manager turned engineer, who's going to talk to us about embracing uncertainty and how we can move fast when we don't have all the data. So put your hands together, please, for Dave Lynch.
Thanks, Jordan. Hello, everyone. Great to see full house in here tonight, and great to see this amazing stage here. You'll notice that these things actually evolve slightly over the night, so like really fancy. You wouldn't see this. Yeah, you wouldn't see this carry on at the Glen Hansard gig. So relax and enjoy it. So I'm Dave. I'm a product engineer here at Intercom, recovering engineering manager, and I want to talk a little bit tonight about moving fast and how to move fast effectively, particularly when there's uncertainty involved. As a student of engineering, we're incentivized to write a lot, incentivized to read a lot. We're expected to solve many well-understood, simple, discrete problems, usually on paper and usually in a sunny afternoon in May and June. This kind of learning has its place. It encourages discipline of thought, and it helps you build muscles that will be really useful later on. But to be successful as a product engineer, you need to master a bunch of different skills, because the incentives for product engineering are different. You're mostly incentivized to deliver results and deliver those results quickly. To deliver those results quickly, you're mostly asked to deliver approximate solutions to difficult to frame and difficult to identify problems. And you need to do all of this really quickly. You'll have to trade off progress over perfection. You'll have to trade off speed over safety. And all of this can introduce a lot of uncertainty. I want to talk a little bit about this uncertain environment and some principles for operating in this environment. But first, a life lesson. So one of the habits that I haven't shook yet in my recovering engineering manager program is delivering life lessons. So bear with me for just like one slide. As an engineer and in life, you'll never know up front what's going to work out, what's not going to work out. You'll never know what's going to make you and what's going to break you. The more you learn, the more you know absolutely nothing. And on a long enough timeline, and this sounds a bit bleak, but on a long enough timeline, we're all players in this tragedy. And on that ultimate of deadlines, to be an engineer in the meantime, you need to ship early, you need to ship often, you need to take risk and be deliberate about managing that risk effectively. And honestly, you need to learn a bunch of things the hard way. Ultimately, to be a successful engineer, you've got to learn to keep it moving. And what I mean by that is, don't spend your career looking at problems. Look through problems. And then move through problems. And move through problems uncomfortably quickly. Now, this is hard. This requires skill. It requires developing a disciplined sense of priority. It requires a willingness to understand that absolutely everything is a trade-off and all options are on the table. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this, right? Move fast and break things. Well, let's just be clear. The guy who wrote this does not have your best interests at heart at all in any way. You do well not to listen to people that don't have your best interests at heart. Why? Because there are things that you really don't want to break. You don't want to break your customers' trust. If you can't have the trust of your customers and you've got no customers, you're done. Game over. But more than this, and more from the perspective of a product engineer and a personal perspective, you don't want to break your spirit. Moving fast and breaking things as a modus operandi over a long enough period is a surefire way to a broken spirit as a product engineer. At Intercom Engineering, we think differently, and we operate by our more robust core value. We say move fast, but optimize for the long term. This is our way of saying move quickly, but don't fuck yourself, and don't fuck your customers. And like all good core values, there's a purposeful tension built into this between move fast and long term. And before you get moving, I'd like to walk you through 5 principles that I've found effective for operating in this environment, to help you work with uncertainty and balance moving fast with optimizing for the long term. Number 1, be an expert in not being an expert. To move quickly and hustle effectively, you need to be able to get to the fundamental core of certain ideas. You need to be able to master them enough to create value. You need to get good at getting to grips with concepts, new concepts, quickly, and really good at making your solutions simple. Solutions, in fact, should be a simple composition of the fundamentals. Don't do fancy for fancy's sake, and get good at knowing just a little bit more than you need to be dangerous, and just enough to leverage for impact. You don't have to be the smartest cookie in the class. You've just got to understand the fundamentals really well and be disciplined enough to bet big on the right hands. Number 2, pick the right problems. The most effective engineers work on the right things. Not necessarily the hardest things, not necessarily the most recent things or the sexiest things, the right things. But what does this mean? Well, we spend a lot of time at Intercom engineering trying to figure out what this means. It's actually quite hard. But in the abstract and at this level, I think of this in 2 ways. First, pick problems where the reward for success is really high. Don't show off or make yourself look smart. Go and solve a problem for your customers. Go and lock in some customer value or solve a problem for your teammates that will enable you to move faster in the future. How many articles have you read recently on Twitter or wherever it is you consume your junk media that recommend rewriting your code base in this programming language or refactoring to patterns or using this particular hot new Java framework? Framed in this way, rewriting your code base is a solution to a problem that will not likely be successful. In fact, it's more likely to yield negative value. The rewards for success in this endeavor is most likely not high. Secondly, make sure the cost of failure is low and that it's fixed. Failure is going to happen. You're going to frame the problem incorrectly. You're going to pick the wrong problem. Stuff is going to happen that you can't anticipate up front. This is just the nature of moving quickly and the nature of moving into the future. All of this may actually be beyond your control. But all of this actually shouldn't matter provided you keep the cost of failure fixed and you keep it low. And what do I mean by low? Well, at most, you just write off the 3 days or the 5 days that it took for you to get there in the first place. And when I say this, and when I say fixed, I mean not this sprawling, open-ended mess of vague project that's going to get you back to the baseline that you were at in the future. Move in small increments that add incremental value and make sure that moving backwards is not costly. So pick the right problems. Pro tip, your choice of JavaScript visualization framework is probably not your biggest problem. 3, make success or failure obvious and make it obvious to everyone. Think of a time for the product engineers in the audience where you shipped something, finished a project, created a new set of features, and all you felt at the end was an overwhelming sense of anticlimax. Done needs to feel like a win. You have to know that you've locked in value. And this means you need to define what winning looks like, as objectively as possible, with the right metrics, the right customer feedback, just enough to know what the score is. Construct short, tight, frequent feedback cycles, and this will help you understand in flight if you're succeeding or if you're failing or if it's somewhere in between. And once you get here, you're in a really good place. A shared understanding of success or failure and where you are in a project or an endeavor is so important so that you can either exploit your success or mitigate your failure together as a team. Anyone here been a victim of an AWS Green Eye event? Anyone know it? All right. And AWS is the platform on which we build our Intercom products. It's where our servers are located. It's the services we use to provide backend for our programs that deliver value to our customers. AWS Green Eye event is an interesting phenomenon. When AWS is working well and the data centers have electricity going to them, everything is gravy. On their front page, they'll have a big green checkbox and say, yeah, we're all good. When AWS is fucked, half the internet is down. Twitter is down, Intercom is down, Zendesk is down. Really severe event. When AWS is down and Intercom is down and Twitter is down, AWS still have a big green checkbox on the front of the status page. And eventually, when they get enough phone calls or backroom phone calls from people who know people, they'll eventually put a small little eye in the middle of the group. And I used to work in AWS, which makes everybody in AWS feel really good about themselves, but actually is no use for Intercom and no use for our customers. And so from an external perspective, I don't really know why AWS do this. Working with your customers can help mitigate this issue rather than keeping them in the dark. So make sure success or failure is obvious, and make sure that it's obvious to everybody, the stakeholders that matter. Number 4, be really careful about predicting the future. Don't try and get everything right up front. Instead, predict broadly and position yourself to react. Earlier I talked about predicting the future being a mug's game. You have way less control than you think. The future is absolutely more complex than you could ever model. And so the best model is production. The best test case is your customer. Get a good sense of direction. Get a good sense of the problem to be solved and a solution that you want to implement. Use the feedback cycles we talked about earlier to help you move through the problem, but monitor the outcome actively. Don't let a customer tweet be the first insightful reaction. Know the outcome and position yourself to react so that you can exploit the success or you can mitigate the failure. So don't put too much faith in your predictions or models of your customers' behavior. Often your customers don't know what they want until you put it in front of them. Often engineers don't know what a good solution or a good enough solution looks like until it's in production. 5, get more data, and remember, it's just data. Don't get hung up on being wrong. Paint your picture of what is true now. Assume that to be absolutely true, and move with confidence through the problem as if everything were actually true. At the same time, always be looking for new data. Always seek new feedback from wherever you can get it, from your production metrics, from your customers, from Twitter, from anywhere. And when it matters, make sure that you repaint your picture of truth. Don't be precious about it. Repaint it. And after you do this, move forward again with the confidence that you originally have, and keep incorporating that feedback into your moves over and over and over again. Remember, there's no such thing as bad data. It's just data and how you choose to use it. Okay, 5 principles. Be an expert in not being an expert. Pick the right problems, the ones where the reward for success is high, and the cost of failure is low and ideally fixed. Make success and failure obvious, and make sure it's obvious to everyone. Predict broadly and position yourself to react. Get more data, and remember, it's just data. Ultimately, move fast and optimize for the long term. Thank you.